Hey everybody, welcome back to Play the Game HQ. I'm Daniel and this is Everdell Farshore. It is a brand new game set in the Everdell world. This is not an expansion, this is a standalone, fully self-contained game. It is set in the Everdell world, but we have moved from the forest to the coastline. Now, we are calling this an Untainted review because I've never played Everdell. This is my first experience with any game in the Everdell world. So I'm really excited to have the opportunity to review this, present this, and approach this as its own game. I have no bias towards anything in Everdell because I've never played it. Now, this was sent to us by Tabletop Tycoon, and they also sent us Everdell and a couple of the expansions to review. So as soon as I finish shooting this video, I'm going to go home and we're going to play Everdell so that we can do another video comparing the two. But as of right now, I have my full opinion of Everdell Farshore is based on this game and this game alone, not any preconceived preconceptions that I have from Everdell. And honestly, I loved this game. It is a worker placement game where you're going to be placing your workers to collect resources, to score. There's so many different ways that you can score points and so many different strategies that you can take in order to hopefully score the most points and win. And we've played 3 games so far. Each game has been very different in strategy. 1, because of learning the game, and 2, because of the cards that came up. There is a huge deck of cards here. Some of them are repeats, but it is a very substantial deck of cards that has all kinds of different critters and constructions and things that you can build into your city. The cards have a vast variety of abilities, and depending on which cards come available to you during the game, there's so many different ways that you can approach scoring and, again, hopefully winning the game by having the most points. Now, it is worker placement, so your primary function, I say primary function, you can do a lot in this game without actually placing workers. Now, we'll go into that in just a minute. I'm going to go over how the game actually plays in just a second, and then we'll go through kind of full thoughts on the game. But I really liked about this game that it was worker placement. It had some of the standard worker placement feel, but I was able to do a lot more in the first round with my 2 starting workers than I've been able to do in other worker placement games, because there's different ways depending on which cards you build first. There's just so many different ways to do things. And in worker placement games that I've played, I really like worker placement games that sometimes those first couple rounds feel like a wash and you are slowly building to be able to actually do stuff towards the end of the game. And while that is true, you are going to gain workers each season. It's played over 4 seasons. You're going to gain a new worker each season. So obviously you can do more with your workers as the game progresses. But I felt like, especially in the second game we played, because of the cards that came up, I was able to do so much early in the game that really set me up for, honestly, a really, really good score at the end of the game. But it was just because of the cards that I had access to and the strategic decisions that I made. Now, what I do know is similar to Everdell is you have this big 3D element. This is the lighthouse. It has virtually no function other than to separate the draw pile from the discard pile. Now, the discard pile is face down, so there is a little bit of function to it because you need to separate the draw and the discard pile so that they don't, because there's not a face-up discard pile. It is nice to have something to separate those so they don't get mixed up. They say you can place your workers on it to gather them, but I tell you, it's real hard to get 6 of these workers on each of these little spots. So it's nice. It's a nice 3D element. It's a nice piece of flair. Normally it would go up here at the top of the board, but then that would block your view. So we're putting it over here right now. The game is played over 4 seasons. You're going to start in winter and progress to spring, summer, and fall. Each season you progress, you're going to be able to do some special things, and key to those progressions, you're going to get more workers. You have cards that you're going to be building into your city. Those cards are going to get you points just by having the cards. So they each have a shell on them that's going to tell you how much that card is worth. Most of them are worth 1 to 2 points, but there are some very valuable cards in there. There are also cards, there's prosperity cards, which have this little windmill on them that are going to give you scoring at the end of the game based on other things that you have done. So this one gets you 1 point for different types of critters that you have, but Your main scoring from cards is going to be from the cards themselves, and then your prosperity cards that are going to give you multipliers based on other types of cards or other elements that you have completed or things that you've done. You have the ship that's going to move around this track. Everyone has a boat, and that boat is going to move up one space at a time around the track, mainly based on the cards that you build. Some cards specifically, like this one, like the galley, will allow you to move your ship. The galley moves your ship 3 spaces. So some cards will specifically move your ship, but the main way is going to be by these windrose tiles. Now, let's talk about cards for a second because that's important to the windrose tiles and to the maps. There are 2 different types of cards with different characteristics. There's critters and there's constructions. There's unique and common critters and constructions. So there's 4 different types of cards in that way. And then there's 5 different types of card functions. There's production cards, which are the green leaves. There are governance cards, which are the scrolls. There's traveler cards, which are the knapsack. There are destination cards, which are the paw prints. And then again, there's prosperity cards, which are the little windmills. So when you build a card, you're going to check the windrose tiles. And if you match one of those, you're going to move your ship 1 space. If you match both of those, you're going to move your ship 2 spaces. So if I built the pirate right here, the pirate is a unique critter and it is a traveler card. So I would move my ship 2 spaces from the start space to 1, 2 to the 4 space. So that's going to get me, if we ended the game now, I would get 4 points for my boat's location. You'll also notice the treasure marks around here. You get treasure mainly by moving your boat, but also by some cards. Treasure is worth 2 points at the end of the game for each treasure that you have, and each treasure token can also be spent throughout the game as a wild resource. So as you move your ship across this track here, you're going to be gaining treasure and gaining end game points. If you manage to make it all the way to 60 points, just get out of your boat and walk around a little bit. You cannot go past. You have reached the dock on the other side of the bay, and you've gotten 60 points, which is a lot. That's really good. The highest we've gone in our games is in the mid 40s. A lot of times we were in the 20s to 30s. So the boat is going to be a fairly large source of points if you are strategic about building cards when the tiles match the type of cards that you're building, and you build cards that allow you to move your ship. Now, let's talk about maps for a second. Maps are a massive source of points in this game. You claim maps by sending your worker to the dune space, and you have to qualify for the map. So to get this one, I have to have 4 of the green production cards. To get this one, I have to have 3 of the traveler cards, and so on. The maps all stack a specific way. They have 2, then 1, and then 0. So if you're the first one to get to the map, it's more valuable. So you want to get to those early if you can, but again, you have to build specific cards to be able to get those. And those score as multipliers. So each top card is 2 times the number of maps that you have. So if you are able to get all 6 of those 2 cards, that would be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 times 6 maps. That's 72 points you can get just by maps. But again, that's going to be real hard to get those before somebody else comes in and gets at least one of them. But if you don't keep an eye on the player who is really trying hard to get maps, again, they could potentially get 72 points from just maps alone. And in order to get those maps, they're going to have to build a lot of cards. So left unchecked, someone could really run away with the game with maps. Now, one other core element to this game is the anchors. The anchors are incredibly powerful, incredibly important strategic pieces. Each player starts with 3 anchors, and you can use an anchor to build a critter for free by placing it on a construction of the same type. So I have this customs office. If I had built this customs office, it is a scroll, a governance card. I could use my anchor, put it on that construction card, and build a critter of the same type. So I could, by placing an anchor on this customs office, could build this lighthouse keeper for free. And again, this is an end game setup. This is a full tableau, a full city that I have built out. You're going to start with no cards. So as you build these, again, you only get 3 anchors, so you want to be strategic with those. You probably don't want to build cheap cards with those, but they're a really important part of the game. And again, one of those ways that I talked about earlier that you can do a lot without your workers. So you have 3 anchors that you can use to build critters for free by placing an anchor on an existing construction of the same type. Now, on your turn, you have two things that you can do. You can place a worker, or you can build a card. You can also progress seasons. So three things that you can do. I'll talk about progressing the season in just a second, but you can place a worker on any spot with a paw print. If it has a single duck foot, ducks have feet, they don't have paws. A single footprint will hold one worker and only one worker. A space with multiple footprints can hold any number of workers, and you can send your workers there even if you have one of your own workers there already. Now, your city has a limit of 15 cards, and there is a strict 8-card hand limit. We also have the islands down here that can hold a single player each on each island, and those shuffle through. There's 8 islands in the game. You're going to randomly pick 4 each game, and those give you different mixture of resources or different actions. So this one lets you copy any shoreline, which are the 4 spaces up here. So if one of those is occupied, you could come down here and copy one of those spaces. These 3 just give you a mixture of resources or cards and resources. Now let's talk about seasons for a second. The seasons are how the game progresses and how you get more workers. You start in winter and you move through spring, summer, and fall, and you end the game at the end of the fall season. Something that was really interesting about this game, I've played lots of games where you progress through seasons as you play, but everyone gets to the end of the season at the same time and then waits for the other players to progress. This one doesn't do that. And basically, when you get to the end of what you can do with your season, you go to the next season, you recall all your workers, you get a new worker, and you activate an ability based on the season. So at the end of the spring, you're going to gain a worker. That this little white pelican toucan, I think it's a toucan, shows that you gain a worker, and then it's spring, you activate all of your green cards again. In the summer, you're going to take 2 cards from the bay into your hand. In the fall, you're going to activate all of your green cards and take 2 cards either from the deck or the bay. Now, the last player to progress the season is also going to cycle the windrose tiles. So they're going to put a new tile there, and that's going to give you new ways to build your ship to move your ship based on the cards that you're building in your city. The last player to progress to the summer is also going to flip over or sink 2 islands of their choice. It's summer, the tide is rising, 2 of the islands are going to go away. Again, it's the last person that progresses the season into the summer that gets to pick which 2 isles go away, and it is fully their choice. So as far as how the game actually plays functionally, that's everything it is. Each turn you're going to either place a worker, build a card, or progress the season if you're at the end of what you can do. If you don't have any resources to spend, if you don't have any workers to place, you're going to progress the season, recall your workers, and get the bonuses and add a new worker. So by fall, you're going to have 5 workers. You start with 2, and you're going to get 1 each season. So you'll have five workers to place in the fall. Now, I did forget to mention that in addition to all of these locations, you also have location cards that you're going to be building into your town that you can send a worker. So you can send a worker to any of these locations or to any card in your town. Now, this one right here, the Illuminator, there are a couple of really very strategically powerful cards in this. The Illuminator lets you copy a location in another player's city. So a location that another player has built, you can copy the ability of that location by sending one of your workers to that spot on your card. Other than that, the locations that you build are only for you to use. You can't send a worker to another player's town. You can only send them to your town or your city, but there are cards that let you use abilities that other players have built in their town, which is incredibly strategic, very powerful to have. Now, I mentioned this earlier. This game, I've played a lot of worker placement games, and I really felt like this game allowed me to do more without my workers than a lot of worker placement games do. A lot of worker placement's kind of that because you're gaining more workers as the game progresses. Those first few rounds really feel you're not doing very much. They move very quickly. You have 2 people to place. Maybe you have enough resources to buy a card or 2, but overall, you're not able to do a whole lot. I didn't feel like that in this. The second game especially, Allison and I both hung back in winter and spring while the boys moved on. I think both Jared and Peyton were to the fall while we were still in the spring because we just had so many opportunities. And the second game that we played, I very seldom actually went to any of these spots to gain resources. Resources are pretty hard to come by with these spots right here in this game because, and you're getting 2 mushrooms for going there, but if you pay attention and are really strategic with the cards that you build, you can get the resources from the cards. And there's some cards that let you multiply resources. There's some cards that give you a discount on building other cards. There's a lot of ways to build out your city beyond sending a worker to a spot, gaining those resources, and just outright buying the cards. You have your treasure. So if early in the game you pay attention to what the windrose tiles are, you can very strategically move up this track, gain treasure to spend as wild resources, and then build out more cards. And yes, you are spending treasure, which is worth points at the end of the game. But the best game that I played, I didn't care about holding on to treasure until the last round, at which point I had all 15 cards I could have in my tableau here. And at that point, I couldn't spend any more treasure, so that's where I focused on getting those points. And I also had cards that multiplied for treasure, so I had an incentive to keep treasure. But other than that, I was very freely spending treasure in order to build out cards because that allowed me to do it without having to waste a worker going to these spaces and going to just collect resources. I did have to do that some, but I was able to focus on building cards that gave me resources and on collecting treasure and using that as a resource because it doesn't require a worker to get treasure. Now, at the spring and the fall, when you progress to those 2 seasons, you also activate all of your green cards. So focusing on getting green production cards built early in the game, however you can do that, is going to give you an influx of resources when you progress to the spring and again when you progress to the fall. I really enjoyed this game because in addition to, I know that Everdell gets compared to Creature Comforts a lot. And I think Creature Comforts, I love Creature Comforts, but it felt more set collection. You're building sets of cards, you're getting cards that complement other cards, where this felt a lot more, it had more of an engine builder feel where I was collecting cards, but I was collecting cards to build kind of a mini engine. Again, getting these cards that generate resources at different points in the game. Also, some cards let you activate a production card that's already in your town or in your city. So it felt more, again, it's not an engine builder. It's not a true engine builder, but it did have that feel where I was building out a tableau of cards that were going to give me very valuable abilities that made my decisions stronger and more powerful as I progressed through the game. Now, from a production standpoint, the game is beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous artwork. I love the production quality of the game. Everything feels high quality. Each of these resources may not be able to tell on camera. They're different materials. Like the wood is actually wood. The seaweed is kind of a squishy, it's thin, rubbery material. It mimics seaweed. You have your sea stones that are a hard, translucent plastic. And then your mushrooms are kind of a spongy, squishy material. It's not soft, but it's like it's not, I guess it's not squishy, but it's like a rubber material. The shells, which are really, they're to track points when you get a card that gives you points mid-game. The shells are thin. They're a beautiful kind of pearl finish. They feel like little seashells. The treasure chests are thick cardboard. The boats are plastic. The meeples, the miniature, your meeples are wooden. Everything about this game is really high quality from a production standpoint. Again, the artwork is gorgeous. The theme is on point. It was just a really pleasurable experience to play. Learned it really quick. The rules are fairly simple once you kind of know how to use each location. I think the only rules checks we had on the second and third game were to clarify a couple of minor things about if you were able to draw multiple cards, if you could draw from different places, like with the lookout where it says to draw to your hand limit from the deck or the bay, if you had to pick one or the other, or if you can mix and match. It was things like that we were checking for in our second and third games, and even really late into the first game, it wasn't core rules. The core rules are very simple. The iconography is really helpful. It was a very easy game to learn and a very easy game to play, but a very not difficult, but a very strategic game to master. There are so many different ways that you can go, and it really was a truly unique experience based on the cards that came out. And Alice and I both felt that we had great second games, and our third game was kind of a slog, not in an unfun way, but it was like the cards that were coming out were just harder to match together. Everyone had the same cards coming out in the bay, so it wasn't a bad thing. It was just I had to work a lot harder for my points in that third game than I did in the second game. The second game I drew cards great. The cards that came out into the bay were really great. They all worked together. They were cohesive. And we must have just shuffled better the third game because it was a lot harder to find those combos to work well together and to really kind of just to really build out that engine with the cards that we had in the third game. But it was still a lot of fun. What's something I forgot to mention, if you have duplicate cards in the bay, they stack on top of each other, so you're always going to have 8 unique cards to draw from. Really great. I love not having to try and work through duplicate cards, so that's a really nice little just the thought that went into that of stacking those, so you always have 8 unique cards. So Everdell Farshore, again, we will have a video comparing Everdell to Farshore so that we can compare and contrast, show you the differences. But as of right now, I have not played Everdell, so I can't tell you those differences, but I am going home right now to do that. So if you have any questions about the game, please let us know. As of right now, you can find this game on the Tabletop Tycoon website, and as it becomes available other places, we'll leave links below to where you can find the game. Again, if you have any questions, leave a comment and I will answer them as quickly as I can. I think that is all for now. Really love this game. Really enjoyed playing it. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye.